She got what she deserved.
Let's go, I'ma kick.
The Front Room is a 2024 psychological horror movie, written and directed by the Eggers brothers in their feature film debut. It stars Brandy, Catherine Hunter, and Andrew Burnap. It tells the story of a newly pregnant couple who are forced to take in an ailing, estranged stepmother.
You want to give us everything?
We can pay off the house with that money.
If she comes to the house, we're going to be her disciples.
So I just got back from the theaters checking out The Front Room, and this is A24's latest movie, and it's done by the Eggers brothers. It's not Robert Eggers, it's his two brothers, and it's their film debut. And to be honest, I generally like most A24 movies. A lot of them I love. They're just my kind of movie. But this is one of the rare misses for me, and this one really missed. I'm not gonna lie, I had a hard time keeping my eyes open because what is represented in the trailer as a horror movie ends up being really, not to be too vulgar, but ends up being a dick tease. It just, the whole time sets you up to make you think that there's going to be more horror to come, and that there's all this foreshadowing for this really dark edge, and you feel like it's going to go for it because that's what A24 movies do. Yes, it's slow, especially in the first act. It is very slow, whereas most A24 movies are slow, but they're slow burns, so they build up into something, and this feels like it's going to throughout the whole thing. But then when it finally gets there, it's not very horror, and it's very predictable. You see everything from a mile away. There's nothing that really catches you off guard, but the things that you think are actually going on, you find out, no, it just, and not just that, there's a bunch of holes in this, a bunch of things that they seem to set up that go nowhere. I don't really understand what the point of that was, except for, like I said, to once again lead you into feeling teased by this movie. And it's one of those situations, which also doesn't work for me, is that it's nobody is likable in this. You don't like any of the characters. You're not rooting for any of them to succeed, and there isn't really a cut and dry villain because they're all just kind of shitty in one way or another. There's just zero chemistry in this couple, and I don't know if that was a directorial decision or if the acting just, if it's their fault, you know what I mean? But they don't feel like a couple at all. There were so many times when I'm like, that's not how couples actually talk. That doesn't sound natural. From the jump, it feels awkward. It just doesn't sound like the way people talk to each other. For instance, real couples don't generally call each other by their full names. You know, maybe they'll call each other by a shortened version of their first name, but usually it's that or a nickname or even just babe or honey. It's rare, at least everybody I know and every relationship I've been in, that you call each other by your names, especially when you're by yourselves in the house. Yeah, if you're out and about, that's different. But I'm saying in the privacy of your home, it's just the two of you and you're having a conversation, you rarely call each other by your first name unless, you know, you're upset at each other or whatever. But that's just one tiny example, but it just never felt authentic. And so you just don't feel like you care what happens to this couple. And it's funny because recently on the Dead Meat podcast, they did a ranking where they talked about the best, worst significant others. And I'm telling you, if they had seen this movie ahead of time, this guy would probably be the winner, because the husband in this is the biggest piece of shit. He's worthless. He just treats his wife like crap, which is played by Brandy. She's pregnant and dealing with all these issues to do with pregnancy, as well as other things involving work and all this other stuff. And then she's dealing with this mother-in-law who's like, you know, Satan himself embodied by this little old lady, and her husband won't lift a finger, and whenever he does, he just kind of complains about it. He's just, I was actually getting angry at this guy. But then even Brandy, her character. You don't really like her that much, because even though for the most part you can identify with her and understand where she's coming from, there are moments where you're like, you're not helping this situation either. You're kind of a shitty person too. You're way too thin-skinned. You get way upset over the littlest thing, and I don't know, it just, the way it's written is the problem. It's not any of them. It's not that even the ideas here, the story here are bad. It's one, it doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't at all take you where it needed to take you. This movie really needed to have way more teeth, especially in the final act. It needed to lead somewhere with all this foreshadowing and all these things it's trying to build. It needed to get somewhere, and it never does that. And then the dialogue is really, really bad. But the core story, the setup, I guess I should say, is pretty decent. And I feel like it's a shame, because I think you could do something with that setup. But it's competently shot and well edited. I have no doubt that down the road we're gonna hear the Eggers brothers doing something that is really good, because I can see some talent there. They're just not there yet, especially if you're gonna try to play in the horror realm, because it doesn't feel like these guys know what horror is. And I feel like, especially labeling your movie as a psychological horror movie, I mean, this horror is really pushing it. Maybe thriller, but even then, it's just like, it's not really very thrilling. It's just kind of uncomfortable and miserable. I don't know, but the one really, really, really bright spot in this film is Catherine Hunter. She is incredible in this. She is the most ornery, shitty little old lady you've ever seen. And she's just maniacal and conniving and so much shit, so much piss. When you see this movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. But man, what a ornery little cuss this old lady is. But she just acts the hell out of this role and is really fun to watch. So I think this movie is worth seeing just for her performance, but just go into this knowing that you're not going to get much in the way of horror. It's not going to take you where you think it's going to, because for the vast majority of this movie, it feels like it's going to go here, and when you get there, there's nothing there. So yeah, it's a bummer. Like I said, it feels like a dick tease. But it's definitely not a bad movie, so I'm not trying to say that either. It is kind of slow. It is kind of prodding at times. There are plenty of moments where you're just kind of, all right, are you gonna do anything, movie? Like, let's go somewhere. But mostly I think that's from me just expecting more in the way of horror in this than it gives me. And for a good chunk of this, I was thinking that maybe Brandy just was not a very good actor, because she has this real monotone, kind of lifeless performance, and I was just like, what's going on here? And then things ramp up, and when it does and really shit starts to hit the fan with her, she really showed that in the right role, with the right dialogue and script around her, I think we could see something with her acting, because she really goes for it. Is very intense, very emotional, and believable. So that's another bright spot for me. I also found this to be pretty well shot, just the way it looks in general. It's a pretty good looking movie. But all in all, it wasn't anything special. It's kind of a bummer, because I was hoping for it to really be a little more wild and nuts than it is. And I'm not saying I expected it to be action-packed. I love art house slow burns. That's one of my favorite kind of movie. And for a lot of this, I was with it. I was like, all right, cool, because it has all that foreshadowing that you generally see in the slow burn horror. It just doesn't ever pay off. And so for me, it's like, if you're gonna have an art house, slow building kind of film that has a lot of dialogue and drama and all that, then you gotta give a payoff. And when there's not any kind of payoff, much less you set things up that don't go anywhere, that are just more than anything just kind of tricking you. You're making you think that one thing is going on, and in reality, there's none of that really going on. Then it's just kind of a letdown. And so that's kind of what I felt with this. So it just didn't work for me. But movies like this generally do. So it's not that I just don't like this kind of movie. So it's more of this one in particular, I felt like didn't quite have the things that it needed to really make it work.
My name is Belinda. Belinda.
But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for checking this out. I want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to find out how you can help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or you can become a channel member and help support the channel that way. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about Beetlejuice. And I'll see you guys next time.